Hello and welcome to this episode of the Nothing Ventured Primer. Today in the studio with me, I'm super excited to have with me Andrew Poesaste. A junior investor at Angular Ventures, investing from inception to Series A in enterprise and deep tech ventures born in Europe and Israel. Andrew, super excited to have you with me here today.
Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to it.
Amazing. So let's dive straight in. Do you want to give us a bit of background about yourself and how you got into venture?
Yeah. So, I mean, how long have you got? But, my journey starts in Australia. So, I mean, going back, at high school, I ended up doing computer science subjects at university. And then when I got to university, I realized that there were no real opportunities, and we can talk about that. It's funny because you actually lived in my hometown of Brisbane, which is quite rare to have someone here and have that journey. But when I got to the end of university, it wasn't any exciting landscape of what I wanted to do next. So I thought about it, and at the time I was working interning at a family office, and I was also playing a pretty decent level of poker, which involved a lot of databases and a lot of statistics and thinking about these things. And a mentor at the time told me, listen, you have a British passport, why don't you go to London? There is 600 times, I remember him saying the word 600 times, there's a bit of hyperbole now looking back, more firms and more opportunities. This is the way that trading is moving. And this is like a perfect skill set for what you wanted to do. So I thought at the time, listen, I've got nothing to lose. This is the opportunity. To go
at the very least, it's a walkabout, right?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Right. At the worst, I was going to come back to Australia and I was going to find a job that was pretty much the same of what I would have got anyway. So I would have just went round the roundabout. Would have taken a bit longer, but would have been at the same place. So I ended up, traveling for a year, doing everything that, and probably an idiotic 20-year-old does at the time, running with the bulls and many things. And then kind of settled in London and interviewed at a bunch of firms and was very, very lucky to get into one of the best kind of algorithmic and high-frequency trading firms, basically combining technology and markets. And ended up starting there, and then my career kind of progressed till I ended up kind of leading one of the product groups there, which is commodities. And, one of the largest in terms of things like soybeans and wheat and corn. Quite weird to do this, but algorithmic and high-frequency trading, I don't know how much you know about it. People think it's like predicting where Google will go tomorrow. But it's more about like thinking of Waterloo Station or Liverpool Street, where there's a lot of people walking in a crowd. How do you predict a crowd? So you'll get lots of things wrong, but you're making many, many bets over time. And it's combining hardware. So you've got servers sitting all around the world. You've got some in Chicago, New York, Singapore, Sydney, and they sit right next to the exchanges. And you're using a combination of mathematical models, hardware, and software, basically to mine money in effect. And it was an incredible journey. I mean, there's nothing, to work on problems that you can't Google, it's incredible. Like it seriously is. Intellectually, financially rewarding, but very, very stressful.
Yeah.
And I mean, coming up to my 30th birthday, even I got to the point that I was, like everyone, you have like this kind of quarter life crisis. And you're like, do I want to keep looking at 8 huge screens of Linux boxes with numbers and working on there's some, as I said, incredible problems. But I felt like in the back of my head, I'd been reading like Fred Wilson and Bill Gurley for 10 years, and just thinking, it felt so far away, especially in Australia at the time, that venture capital was an ideal job, but just nowhere near where I could be, right? But then when I went and did this journey at the hedge fund, you realize that from a tech perspective, you were far ahead of other industries, and the other industries were going that way. So I was going to Google Machine Learning Meetup, I was going to Pi London, I'm going to these open source things, and I just realized wow, we were ahead. And so this is the way the world's going. Even yesterday, I went to a talk where it was the head of data at Pandora, so the largest consumer jewelry company. And he talked about their journey of data. And they're just today, I'm talking about 5-6 years ago, they're just today getting to the point where you buy a piece of jewelry in a store, well, they got to upload that and move it to all the models so that your Instagram doesn't show you the same thing that you just bought, right? But that's real time. That's where people are getting to. Yeah. But we were there 8-10 years ago.
Yeah.
Right? And so for the first time when I was thinking about, the 30th birthday, thinking about venture, it was the first time where I really thought I didn't have just something to add. I actually had a competitive advantage. And the two axes of that, one was company selection. I knew the problems that were needed in data engineering, on these databases, on security, a whole host of these things. And then second was talent selection. The type of founder that starts a dev tools company or a machine learning company is vastly different than the old cohort who started maybe Snapchat or a B2B SaaS HR company. And you need to speak the language, you need to understand it. And so if I had people talk about superpowers. I don't think I have any superpowers, but if I had to point to one, it was just being able to translate both technology and business together. I had to work with, people who knew far more about those individual categories, math or hardware, and actually discern that into product or into P&L. And so it was that time I was like, okay, let's try and make this move. And that was kind of, I can go further, but that was kind of the impetus to try to make the move.
Amazing. And so you're now with Angular Ventures, which is a super cool firm investing in Europe and Israel. So let's talk about Angular for a second. So what sort of funds you have under management, what stages and sectors you invest in?
Yeah, so this was I'll go back a little bit to go forward. So when I did make that jump, I wanted to see who understood these things. And when I went to speak to people at big firms, and I won't name them today, they didn't really...
Oh, feel free.
It's still kind of largely true, but they didn't really understand this attack vector. I think it's much more understood now and well-trodden, but still then, I could probably count the amount of investors in Europe who'd use Git on one hand. And I said, okay, so let's look at the companies that are exciting. One of them I was excited about was called Snyk, which now everyone knows is the world's largest developer security company. But at the time was just solving a need that was it was obvious to me. So anyway, I said, who understood this? And at the time, the person that did the pre-seed was Bold Start in the US, which we love and we're good friends with. Now lucky to do co-investments with them. But it was with Gil Dibner. And so Gil, most people know him by being well outspoken on Twitter
just
and having just a little bit. And I think it's very healthy for the industry to have someone who maybe a bit of cynicism, but reality checks.
He holds a mirror up to what's actually happening, and there's no BS, I think, with what he says. Yeah,
exactly. And so he was starting a firm. I went and met him, and through the power of Twitter, and met him and kind of let him know where my head was at. And he was starting a firm, and he said, "Listen, come here, and I'll teach you a little bit about the ropes. We'll see if this turns into a real firm." And, that was the kind of start. So I jumped onto him, and it was his thinking from his work in Israel. And then when he came to Europe, that he realized that, there was really technical founders everywhere, evenly distributed, maybe less access, that could build these companies from anywhere. And that he believed that he wanted to start a firm that was all built around trying to help people at seed. And at seed, it's vastly different than Series A and beyond. Seed stages is all about product, usage, customers, and that iteration loop of learning and having opinion and building product and really just increasing that iteration speed. So Angular is completely built around low volume, high conviction. So we do about 6 to 8 things a year, and we try and provide the best service to founders that we can and the best product. And that, kind of goes in different ways, but we're lucky to have a very small but powerful venture partner program. That includes, introduction to customers. That includes a whole host of things to them. We try and quarterback, the Series A for people. I think the big kind of focus here is what makes the best seed firm, or what makes actually any good venture firm. It should de-risk the company. And if you're not de-risking the company, then, maybe you're just adding money, which is okay. And listen, it's a privileged position to be in when you can choose who you want. But if you're starting, especially a company in developer tools or infrastructure or data, you need someone who understands the playbook, and you need someone who can really help you at those early stages. So that's Angular. You asked about kind of check size, so we invest all across Europe and Israel. We can invest in a Belgian person in San Fran or an American person in Paris. I say we try and avoid Americans in America. There's enough people fishing there. Our check size is very flexible. So we like to lead seed rounds. That can be pre-seed, that can be day zero, that can be a larger seed. Our check size is very flexible. It can be as low as kind of 400K and as high as 4 million US. And it's whatever's right for the company. We can co-lead with people. I guess what we don't do is we don't do the small check. Our model doesn't scale for that. Like we said, it's if we're going to live up to the promise that we said to founders, like we can't do 20 things a year. You just don't have time.
Yep.
So that's the thinking of Angular. We've since Fund 1 was $42 million fund with an opportunity side vehicle. That's been really successful. We're lucky to have, even with valuation changes, a couple unicorns coming out of that. I think that will continue to blossom. Fund 2 moved to 80 million as the primary fund, again with a kind of $40 million opportunity fund to help with the follow-ons. And we're halfway through Fund 2 now. And the biggest kind of development was adding David Peterson from Airtable, who was the first person who led growth at Airtable and then partnerships. So he's really added that kind of product-led growth and I think extended the team's thinking around the different types of enterprise and modern enterprise software. And I think between three of us, we really cover it well.
Amazing. And so if you were to think about three companies either in the portfolio or outside that you're really excited about, what would those three companies be?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start with our portfolio, and then I won't just talk about our portfolio. But the first one is Paradigm. So Paradigm are building on the DBT kind of vein of innovation. So DBT is data build tool. It was started by these people in the US, and it's a new way for you to basically write data pipelines in code. And there's a bunch of reasons why that is going to save an awful amount of time. When I first met Christoph, and Fabio, but Christoph, to me, he ran product analytics at Revolut, and he's one of those people who's just tenacious. Like he is, the way he thinks about it. And, why I'm excited about it, over the last few years, we've just had this explosion of data companies in every category. And when I think about the categories, like we know that in venture, things are either unbundling or bundling.
Yeah.
And I think in that we went through the parabola, through the top of the parabola, and we're coming down and we're going to bundle.
Yeah.
And so Christoph realized that on the top of DBT, he could actually build a product which helps analytics engineers, that's what the new title is, but basically in immense ways. So data catalog, data lineage, collaboration, a bunch of things. Instead of all these people sitting around getting like a massive queue of tickets and just having to like slowly move through it, which doesn't help anyone, or you want to be proactive. I know that you, even in your products, you try and think of how do I be proactive instead of reactive and just having boring work. He's really enabling that, and they are doing like an incredible job. They're a little bit stealthy, so they try and keep what they're doing, but they're getting more now out of it, and I think they're one of the most exciting companies, especially in Europe, and I think in the world of DBT. Another company that I'll pick, who should I pick? I mean, there's so many, but I'll pick Buddybase. Buddybase are a company that are one of the largest open source app development companies in the world. We were lucky they're based out of Belfast, which is quite a rarity, but now they're really taking the next step. So they had this amazing, activation energy around their project and providing basically like if you're at a company, you do all these mini apps. So it's like in between a spreadsheet and a database. You do all these mini apps to like help with what they call CRUD apps, but you do like admins, you do dashboards, you do this, and they're all kind of, but they're hard to build, they're hard to maintain, they're annoying. Yeah, they're annoying. Whereas you can fire up Buddybase and you can either connect to your own database or you can basically create a middle layer between all these data things. And it's so simple, and they're seeing companies, I mean, they've had, the Bulgarian government used them for all voting. I think it was like millions of users.
Wow.
And they did it through open source. So there's, no one's coming in and seeing the end data. And they managed to scale to that. I mean, they're doing incredible things. So they're really, really exciting. The third company I'll pick is outside the portfolio, so we can,
keep balance.
Yeah, keep balance.
Yeah.
And I won't pick OpenAI. I think that'd be a bit tried. One is called LangChain. They're really exciting, and they're in this new stack of ML ops, which is machine learning operations. And so there's a whole new way that you're going to have to use these models, these big, large language models. If you've used ChatGPT, which most people have, you have to ask it a question. You have to prompt it. But that's not enough, because what we have to do is maybe take the output of the other prompt, and there's a thing called double prompting. Mm-hmm. So we might then take that prompt and ask it again.
Well, that's why there's a whole new generation of prompt engineers, right? Like now you got to figure out how to talk to the AI in a way to get the answer that you need to get, rather than a bit of sort of a fuzzy one. Yeah,
exactly. And then take another use case where you take a model where you say, create a play or a script, right? So that's one, again, probably similar to the ChatGPT. You take out the output of that. Then you put it into a different model and say, now make me a movie. But so you need to be able to chain these models together and take prompts and move them. So LangChain is really that kind of, orchestration engine between these things. And it's like, once again, I think open source and community are just huge drivers of innovation. And
massively
you can see
powerful,
it. Yeah, and you can see it around LangChain.
Amazing.
Yeah.
And if you were to think about one or two technologies that you're super excited about coming up, obviously you can say generative AI, I guess, but I'm sure we'll get into that a bit later on the main podcast. But yeah, what are you really excited about?
I'll pick a technology and then one maybe like a broader sector, just to mix it up a little bit. So first one, I will pick GPT, and the reasons maybe not for what others pick, which is I think people are seeing, as I said, this kind of chat interaction, but there's far greater things that it can do in weird ways. And let's just pick a few. So if you run like an old school, I'll pick a weird example, a surf shop. You have a surfboard machine, and I'm
You can tell you're from Brisbane, yeah.
Right? But you can't talk to the machine. It's really, really hard, right? That doesn't have an API. It doesn't have these things. Well, you might have just someone who's an expert at creating surfboards. They might now be able to interface with that surfboard machine now, because they can just say, can you please basically scan all the ports, all the kind of software, and create for me a front end that I can just type what I want into it. Then it creates this API out of nothing. Then you can just type natural language. You say, hey, I want to speed up this component. I want to do this. You just write in natural language. You've now created like a mini vertical software on the fly that no one could have the TAM to build for you. Like no one's building that for you, but you can build it yourself. And that's not a message thing. That's creating new vertical software within a piece. And so I think now, the overarching goal, I think, as we continue in technology and innovation, is there's a lot of people who have been left behind, who are domain experts in different industries, who should be are the domain experts. They should be able to create their own software. They should be able to create, work with these tools. And I think this is an enabler to this. I think that's what, to me, blew me away, is how well this generalizes. And I think there's just so many pockets of opportunity where the boring stuff, the dumb stuff, the stuff you don't think about, that's where a lot of opportunity will be. So hopefully, not to try to answer about the technology, but I think used in different ways. And then second, I think, the most exciting place that I'm seeing stuff come up recently, and it's hard for me because it's one that's really hard to understand, and we can talk about a generalist investor versus a domain expert, but is in biology. The amount of interesting companies being built. I'll name some, there's an open source hardware company called Opentrons. So you can go buy lab hardware without having to pay it. You can use pipettes at home. We're seeing basically kind of VATs as a service. So there's one called Core Biogenesis in Paris, and there's another one in the Valley where you can make, meats, or you can make, there's different things you can create, and there's some really cool companies. Another one called Cradle Bio out of Switzerland. Just people who are multidisciplinary, and as I've seen that from my hedge fund days, is when you have multidiscipline and you see kind of software start to eat it, it creates so much opportunity. And so biology, if you think about like a DNA kind of sequence, we can turn that into vectors, and then we can turn that into binary code. And so now we're starting to see great libraries pop up. We're seeing data pipelines pop up like Latch Bio and stuff like that. So we're seeing what we saw in data maybe in 2012 happening in biology today. But the machine learning component of it, and the great thing about machine learning is you couldn't intuit the results. Before you had to kind of think of the experiments.
You almost had to have the answer before you did the experiment. You were
Exactly.
moving towards, well, I believe I have this hypothesis. This is what I think is going to happen. I'm going to try and prove that. Now you don't need the hypothesis. You're just like, let the machine tell me what the result is.
Yeah, a simple one, but a great example is we can take a picture of an eye, and before, like, no one thought this was possible. I can tell the gender. You can't do it as a human. The machine can do it. And now we're actually moving in that section. We're moving to a way where we can actually predict diabetes and everything from a picture of an eye. But before, no one thought it was possible to predict gender. And you can't actually as a human. It's really, really hard. You can't do it actually, but the machine can. So my point is this is now creating powers as humans for us in different ways.
Yeah, it's that intersection of tech and bio. It's super exciting. Andrew, amazing. Thank you so much for doing the primer with me. I can't wait to talk about more of this stuff in the main episode. Great to have you here.